Welcome to Femme Fantasy, where transformation, elegance, and self-discovery come to life. I suppose, looking back, the whole thing began on a Thursday morning, the kind of morning you only remember because something inside you sensed a shift before it even happened. I was 58 at the time, older than most interns in that glass-paneled corporate tower, old enough that the young folks called me sir in that polite but slightly confused way. I had joined the internship program because, after decades of steady but unremarkable work at a logistics company, I found myself widowed, restless, and strangely eager to fill the empty spaces of my days. Everyone else my age was talking about slowing down, but all I felt was a strange need to speed up, to change something, anything, before my life settled into its final shape without asking me what shape I actually wanted. And so, at 58, I became the oldest intern in the history of Wilton and Bray Financial Services. A clumsy one, at that. That Thursday, I had already fumbled 2 cups of coffee, caught my sleeve on the copier door, and sent a stack of marketing drafts fluttering across the hallway like runaway birds. I tried to laugh it all off, but deep down I felt the weight of middle age pressing on me, a blend of self-consciousness, loneliness, and the creeping suspicion that the world was moving faster than I could ever hope to match. But then came the moment that truly shifted my path. The moment I was summoned, unexpectedly, and with little grace, into the office of Miranda Hemsley, the firm's head administrator and, to many, the unofficial queen of the entire building. Miranda was a woman of my own age, 60, perhaps a year older, with that kind of timeless confidence people spend decades trying to cultivate. She always dressed in well-tailored suits, soft pearls, and glasses that gave her the sort of presence that commanded attention even without a word. I admired her from a respectful distance, in the way one admires someone who appears to have figured out exactly who they are. When I stepped into her office, trying not to knock over the umbrella stand for the 5th time that month, she studied me with an expression that wasn't unkind but wasn't particularly patient either. "So," she said, folding her hands, "our infamous intern. You've managed to cause quite the stir before lunch." I swallowed, cheeks warm. I'm sorry. It's been a bit of a morning." Her voice softened. "It seems like every morning is a bit of a morning for you." I nodded, not knowing what else to say. Then, to my surprise, her expression shifted from exasperated to thoughtful. Not mocking, not pitying, just curious, in a way that made me straighten up a little. "Tell me something," she said. "Why did you come here? Truly." I opened my mouth, but the usual responses, career shift, keeping busy, continuing to learn, felt hollow, and maybe she sensed that. So I answered honestly, perhaps more honestly than I intended. "I suppose. I'm trying to find myself again." The moment the words left my lips, I felt oddly exposed. Sharing something vulnerable at my age felt more dangerous than any cup of spilled coffee. But instead of brushing it aside, Miranda nodded, her eyes growing unexpectedly warm. "Well," she said, standing and circling her desk toward me with that grounded grace she carried, "perhaps I can help you do that." I blinked. "Help me, how?" She studied me for a long moment, tapping her finger against her chin. The pause stretched so long it made the air feel tight. "You're in the wrong role," she said at last. "You're too tense trying to fit into something that doesn't suit you. But I have an idea, an experiment, really. Something different. Something that might help you find what you're looking for." I felt my pulse quicken, both nervous and oddly excited. "What kind of experiment?" Miranda smiled, and there was something mysterious in it, something that carried the faint aroma of possibility. "One that may feel unconventional," she said. "But sometimes, the most unexpected paths reveal the deepest truths about ourselves." Before I could ask what she meant, she gestured for me to follow her. And some impulse I still struggled to explain, made me follow without hesitation. That was the day everything changed, though I didn't yet understand how deeply or how beautifully. Miranda led me down a quiet hallway most interns never had a reason to enter. The carpeting softened our steps, and the walls were lined with framed photographs of long-retired employees, each smiling as if they knew secrets the rest of us would never uncover. The air felt cooler there, not cold, but crisp, almost expectant. "I've watched you these past weeks," Miranda said as we walked, her voice surprisingly gentle. "And while others see clumsiness, I see something you've forgotten how to name." I wasn't sure what she meant, but her words landed somewhere deep, stirring something that felt both old and newly awakened.
We stopped in front of a small door with no nameplate.
She unlocked it with a key that gleamed like something rarely used. When she pushed the door open, I found myself staring into a tidy, softly lit side office. Nothing grand, but different.
More personal.
A little oasis tucked away from the humming corporate machinery outside. Inside were a desk, a mirror, an old-fashioned coat rack, and a low cabinet with polished handles. "This," she said, gesturing me inside, "will be your new workspace." I blinked at her in confusion. "My workspace? But I'm just an intern." "Not anymore," she replied, smiling faintly. "As of this morning, you are now my personal trainee." The words felt surreal.
Me?
A personal trainee to the most respected woman in the building? I barely knew how to staple on a good day.
Why?
I managed. "Because," she said as she closed the door behind us, "you are searching for something beyond tasks and titles. You want to rediscover yourself, and sometimes rediscovery requires reinvention." She stepped toward the cabinet and opened it slowly, revealing neatly arranged boxes, organizers, folders, and then, unmistakably, items I had not expected to see in a corporate setting: soft fabrics in muted colors, folded carefully, a small box labeled grooming tools, a pair of simple, graceful flats, and on the top shelf, a delicate silk scarf the color of rose tea.
My breath caught.
"I don't understand," I whispered. "I thought you might not at first."
Miranda turned to face me.
"You are tense in your body,
disconnected from the presence you carry.
You move like someone trying to hide, not someone trying to grow. So, I want to teach you something: poise,
Grace,
confidence, presentation." I glanced again at the items, then back to her. She held my gaze, calm and steady. "But why these things?" "Because," she said softly, "for some people, the easiest way to discover who they are is to try on a version of themselves they never dared consider." It wasn't said with any pressure, and it wasn't said with any strange implication. Her tone remained grounded, professional, and surprisingly compassionate.
She wasn't mocking me, nor trying to coerce me. It felt more like she was offering a door I didn't know existed.
"You don't have to say yes," she added. "But I believe this will help you. Not to change who you are, but to help you see facets of yourself that have been quietly waiting for decades." I touched the edge of the scarf. It felt impossibly soft, like something meant for hands far surer than mine. I should have felt embarrassed or awkward or defensive, but instead,
I felt still.
Like I was standing on the brink of something unexpectedly important. "What would you have me do?" I asked, voice almost a whisper. Her smile deepened.
"For today? Just learn. Try on one small piece.
A scarf, perhaps.
See how it feels.
And let yourself be curious." I hesitated, heart tapping nervously against my ribs. But that same unexplainable impulse from earlier nudged me forward. I lifted the scarf and held it in my hands. The fabric slipped like liquid between my fingers, weightless. When I looked up, I caught Miranda's reflection in the mirror behind her, calm, encouraging, quietly proud.
"Take your time," she said.
"There is no rush." It struck me then, with sudden clarity, that very little in my life had ever been done slowly or thoughtfully. I had spent decades reacting to life rather than shaping it. And now, for the first time in a long time, someone was asking me to shape something intentionally, even if it was as simple as tying a scarf around my neck. I stepped toward the mirror, scarf in hand. In that moment, the path ahead shimmered with possibility. Not dramatic, not flamboyant, just human. Gentle.
Real.
I didn't yet know that this tiny first step would unravel years of hidden yearning, quiet questions, and unanswered emotions. All I knew was that, for the first time in a long while, I felt the strange thrill of becoming unfinished again. I stood before the mirror, the soft rose-colored scarf draped loosely in my hands. It had been years, decades, really, since I'd looked at myself with anything other than practical intent. I shaved, I combed my hair, I adjusted my collars, but rarely did I truly look. And now, here I was, examining the lines on my face, the gentle slackening of skin, the signs of age that I had accepted but never fully acknowledged. They weren't unkind lines. They were the story of a life lived in quiet patterns, but they were familiar to the point of invisibility.
Then I lifted the scarf.
Miranda didn't guide my hands. She simply watched, allowing me the space to move at my own pace. I looped the scarf loosely around my neck, as I had seen older women do in the office cafeteria. Simple, elegant, as natural as breathing to them. But when I saw it on myself, even in that tentative, uneven way, something within me softened.
It didn't feel silly.
It didn't feel wrong. It felt unexpectedly comforting. I know that look, Miranda said gently. Something's clicking, isn't it?
I didn't answer right away.
I was focused on the reflection. A man in his late 50s, uncertain but curious, softened by a piece of fabric that seemed small yet symbolic. The scarf didn't erase who I was. It simply invited me to consider another angle.
Another possibility.
I don't know what to think, I finally said. But I do feel something.
That's all I wanted, she replied.
Feeling is the beginning. She stepped closer and adjusted the fold of the scarf, her touch light. You've spent most of your life being steady, she said. Dependable. Comfortable. Admirable qualities, but they can sometimes bury the spark of self-discovery. Her words hit deeper than I expected.
Because it was true.
I had been steady for so long, steady for my late spouse, steady for my coworkers, steady for the routines that kept the years moving, that I had forgotten what it felt like to explore myself. Does this bother you? I asked her quietly. Seeing me like this?
She shook her head. No. It reminds me of myself at your age.
Her confession surprised me. You? Oh yes, she said with a soft laugh. I didn't always have this presence people think I was born with. That, too, was a late-in-life discovery. Reinvention isn't a young person's privilege. It belongs to anyone who still has the courage to ask questions. Her eyes steadied on mine in the mirror. And you, she added, have far more courage than you realize. I felt a tightness in my chest then, not the uncomfortable kind, but the emotional kind, the kind that comes when old walls shift slightly, letting in a sliver of light. Would you like to try something more? She asked, stepping back. Nothing drastic. Just another small step. My heart quickened. Not out of fear, though there was a little of that, but out of a budding curiosity that felt almost youthful. I nodded slowly. Yes. I think I would. She opened a shallow drawer in the cabinet and revealed a simple set of grooming tools, a soft brush, a small container of translucent powder, and a gentle brow comb. Nothing heavy. Nothing theatrical. Nothing that would make me feel like I was impersonating someone else. These are basic office grooming tools we keep for all staff, she explained. You'd be surprised how many executives ask for a bit of help before a big meeting. Consider this no different, a refinement, not a disguise. She placed the brow comb in my hand. Start with this, she said. Just tidy the lines. See what it feels like to tend to yourself in a way you may not have in years. I lifted the comb, hesitant but willing. As I brushed my brows, careful, deliberate strokes, I felt an unexpected tenderness, as though I were not merely adjusting hair but acknowledging myself. The motion was strangely calming. When I finished, the change was subtle but noticeable. A slight lift, a cleaner shape, a gentler expression. Miranda's eyes warmed. There, she murmured. See how small refinements can reveal what was already there. I nodded, unable to look away from the mirror. It wasn't that I looked like someone else. It was that I looked like a version of me I had forgotten existed, someone softer, more open, more attentive to their own reflection rather than rushing past it. And as I stood there, something inside me whispered a truth I had never allowed myself to hear. Perhaps this wasn't the beginning of pretending. Perhaps it was the beginning of remembering. I stayed in front of the mirror longer than I intended, tracing the small changes in my reflection with my eyes. Nothing dramatic had happened, not outwardly. But inwardly, I felt a shift, subtle but undeniable, like the first gentle push of a tide that carried the promise of something deeper. Miranda stood a respectful distance behind me, giving me space to process. She had that rare quality of knowing when to speak and when silence was the greater kindness. You hold yourself differently already, she said after a moment. Less like you're bracing for impact. I let out a small, self-conscious laugh. I always feel like I'm about to make a mess of something. Her gaze softened. What you call clumsiness, I call hesitance. Once you stop apologizing for existing, you'll find your balance. Her words landed with uncomfortable truth. I had spent much of the last decade shrinking myself, after my spouse passed, after my retirement fizzled, after loneliness settled into my bones like winter cold. I had taken up less space because it felt like the world had already moved on, and I was simply drifting through the leftover corners.
Sit, she said gently, pointing toward the desk chair.
Let's work on posture.
I raised an eyebrow.
Posture.
Yes.
Presence begins with the body. When you carry yourself with intention, your mind follows. She positioned me in the chair, not rigidly but rhythmically, as if she were guiding an old dance partner through familiar steps. She placed my feet softly on the floor, squared my shoulders, not stiff, but open, and lifted my chin with just 2 fingers, barely a touch.
Soft, she murmured.
Not tense.
You're not performing.
You're allowing.
Allowing what? I wondered.
But as she stepped back, I realized the question didn't need an immediate answer. Some discoveries were meant to unfold slowly. She walked around me, examining the posture I held. There, she said with approval. Now try speaking. Speaking.
I chuckled.
What should I say?
Anything you like, she replied.
Tell me what you see in the mirror now.
I hesitated. The question felt oddly vulnerable. But after a moment, I managed. I see someone softer than I expected. Someone I didn't realize I missed.
Miranda smiled gently, not triumphantly. Self-recognition is a powerful thing. I found myself easing into the posture a little more, feeling the way my shoulders relaxed and my breath deepened. It felt different, still me, but quieter, more deliberate. There was a sense of attentiveness, perhaps, that I had never afforded myself. Let's take one more step, she said softly. If you're ready. What step? She reached for a small, ivory-handled powder brush and held it not toward me, but out between us, as if inviting a handshake.
Just a hint of powder, she said.
Nothing visible. Just something to soften the shine and remind you that you're allowed to care for yourself. The gesture was simple, almost ceremonial, but it pulled at something deep within me, something equal parts nervous and hopeful. I hadn't imagined, even an hour before, that I could sit calmly in an office while a colleague, a respected woman my age, offered such gentle guidance.
But I nodded.
She dipped the brush into the translucent powder, tapped it once, and brought it lightly to my cheek. The touch was feather-soft, almost meditative. The powder left no color, no obvious trace, but the sensation of attention, of being tended to, felt unfamiliar in a way that stirred my chest. When she finished, she stepped back and let me look. Again, no dramatic transformation.
No disguise.
Just a subtle evenness in my skin tone, a quieting of the tired shine along my forehead, a faint hint of refinement that made me look cared for.
Sometimes, I thought, the smallest changes reveal the deepest needs. How does it feel? She asked. I swallowed.
Comforting, I said truthfully. I didn't realize how lonely I've been. Miranda didn't respond right away. Instead, she pulled the chair beside me and sat down, her knees angled toward mine, her voice softening even further.
Most of us don't, she said. Not until someone else notices.
And sometimes, reinvention isn't about changing who we are, it's about giving ourselves permission to be tended to again. Her words warmed something long dormant in me. She continued, You're not replacing your old self.
You're expanding.
Adding room for feelings you've ignored for years. Allowing space for a gentler expression. And all this begins with a scarf and a bit of powder.
I asked with a shaky laugh.
Often, she said, smiling, it begins with far less. I let out a slow breath, steady and deep. The quietest realization began to form, not fully, not confidently, but undeniably.
I liked how I felt.
Not as a fantasy, not as escape, but as though I were finally listening to a voice in me that had been whispering for decades. A voice that now, with Miranda's steady hand and perceptive guidance, was growing louder. I think, I said after a long pause, I want to see where this goes.
Miranda nodded with gentle pride. Good.
We'll take it one step at a time.
One step at a time.
And yet, even then, I knew this was no longer just an experiment. It was becoming a journey. Over the following days, Miranda's quiet side office became a sort of sanctuary, one I visited with equal parts curiosity and apprehension. It was remarkable how quickly the routines of that space settled into my bones. Every morning, after sorting documents or delivering reports, I would find myself drifting toward the hallway that led to her private room. Not because I was required to, but because something inside me began to anchor there. On the 4th morning, As I stepped inside, Miranda greeted me with a small smile that felt less like a welcome and more like recognition. "You're carrying yourself differently already," she observed, closing the door behind me. "Even before we begin." I had noticed it too. Not in a dramatic way, but in the little things, how I reached for doorknobs without that old hesitation, how I walked without apologizing for taking space, how my breath felt less tight in my chest. "What do you have planned today?" I asked, feeling a flutter of anticipation I wouldn't have admitted aloud.
"Something simple," she replied.
"But meaningful." She opened the cabinet again, this time reaching for a folded blouse. Not flamboyant, not bright, just a soft, muted mauve fabric with a gentle drape. She held it carefully, like something cherished.
My breath caught. Not out of rejection,
but out of the quiet shock of seeing a garment like that offered to me without judgment or pretense. "You don't have to wear it," she said softly, "but I want you to feel the weight of it in your hands."
I stepped closer and accepted the blouse.
The fabric was cool, smooth, nothing like the stiff cotton shirts I wore daily. It slid through my fingertips like a question I wasn't sure I was ready to answer. "I chose this because it matches the softness you've been rediscovering," she continued.
"This isn't a costume. It's a tool.
A mirror." I stared at the blouse, my heart beating strangely fast. "What if this is too much?"
I asked quietly.
"It might be," she acknowledged.
"And that's fine. But take a moment. Feel it.
Let your mind catch up with your heart." Her voice was steady, patient, never pushing, only inviting. I lifted the blouse and pressed it lightly against my torso, not putting it on, just holding it there. The sensation was strange at first, unfamiliar, almost startling. But as I looked at myself in the mirror, something inside me softened once more. Not because I wanted to become someone else, but because the reflection, the man with lines of age, eyes full of unspoken longing, and a blouse held with gentle curiosity, looked more honest than anything I'd seen in years. "You see it, don't you?"
Miranda asked quietly.
"See what?" "That you're not chasing an illusion. You're uncovering something that has lived in you for far longer than you've allowed yourself to admit."
I swallowed hard.
"I don't know what this means."
"You don't need to," she said.
"Meaning comes later. Right now, just be present with the feeling."
I closed my eyes and let the fabric rest against me. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't thrilling. It was simply peaceful.
A sense of alignment I didn't fully understand, but couldn't deny.
After a moment, I lowered the blouse.
"What happens next?"
I asked.
Miranda walked to the desk and sat down, gesturing for me to join her. "We work on presence again," she said. "But this time, we add voice and movement." "Movement?"
"Yes."
"Not walking a runway," she added with a chuckle. "Just navigating space with awareness." We spent the next hour practicing how to rise from a chair without rushing, how to place my feet with intention rather than habit, how to turn towards someone with openness rather than guardedness. These were small things, almost imperceptible to anyone watching, but they changed the way I felt inside my own skin. At one point, as I practiced walking across the small room, Miranda stopped me with a raised hand.
"Pause," she said.
"Now look at yourself in the mirror."
I turned. My posture was subtly different. More lifted, more rooted, more present.
The scarf from the earlier days rested around my neck again, and though I hadn't quite realized it, I had begun wearing it each session without prompting. It felt natural now, like a companion.
"Do you see the difference?" she asked.
"I think I do." "You're beginning to move with permission," Miranda said. "Permission to be gentle with yourself. Permission to explore. Permission to change."
The emotion in her voice surprised me. It wasn't clinical. It wasn't detached. There was something personal in it, something shared.
I stepped closer to the mirror, studying the older face reflected there. A face that had known both love and loss, resilience and routine. A face that was finally, tentatively, waking up. "Miranda," I said softly, "why are you helping me this way?"
She hesitated for the first time since we began this journey.
Then she looked at me with an expression that carried years of her own undisclosed stories. "Because," she said quietly, "I know what it feels like to discover your truth late in life. And I know what it means to have someone hold the lantern while you walk toward it." Her voice wavered just slightly, enough for me to understand. This wasn't only my transformation. In some quiet, hidden way, it was hers too. After that conversation, something shifted between us, quietly, respectfully, but undeniably. There was no confession, no dramatic reveal, no breaking of professional boundaries. Instead, there was understanding. Two people in the later chapters of their lives, each carrying unspoken histories, each rediscovering parts of themselves they had long tucked away. In the days that followed, our sessions became more fluid, less instructional, more exploratory. I found myself opening up in ways I hadn't expected, sharing pieces of my life I rarely voiced aloud, my years of steady routine, my long marriage that had been full of loyalty but lacking in emotional expression, the quiet grief that had settled in after my spouse's passing, and the lingering sense that I had been living in a muted version of myself. Miranda listened the way someone listens when they, too, have walked through quiet winters of the heart. One morning, she greeted me with something new, a small box, tied neatly with a ribbon. Nothing extravagant, just simple and elegant, like everything in her world. "For you," she said, placing it gently on the desk. I blinked at it. "What is this for?" "For progress," she said with a small smile. "And for courage."
My hands were slightly unsteady as I untied the ribbon.
Inside lay a set of simple, understated clip-on earrings, small silver ovals, polished to a soft sheen.
Nothing loud. Nothing flashy. Just refined. My breath caught.
"I thought," she continued, "that you might like the option of feeling a bit more polished during our sessions. Only if you want to, of course." I touched one of the earrings and felt the cool metal warm under my fingers. "I've never worn anything like these," I admitted. "And yet," she said, tilting her head, "I think they will suit you." Her certainty startled me, but not unpleasantly. It felt like someone seeing a truth about me before I dared to see it myself. "May I?" she asked, gesturing with gentle politeness. I nodded. She stepped closer, closer than usual, and lifted the first earring to my lobe with steady fingers. The pressure was light, just a soft pinch, but the moment it settled into place, something in me stirred. Not radically, not dramatically, just a click, like a puzzle piece nudging into position. When she clipped on the second earring, I felt a faint prick of emotion behind my eyes. Not sadness. Not joy. Something more complex, something like recognition. "There," she whispered, stepping back. "Look." I turned toward the mirror. The change was subtle, barely a whisper of ornament. But it made a difference. Not because the earrings were transformative in themselves, but because of what they represented. Permission. Care. Intention. A willingness to see myself differently. "I didn't know I could look like this," I murmured. "You've always been capable of it," Miranda replied. "You simply needed space to allow it." For a moment, we both stood in silence, the room holding the delicate weight of the moment. Then she said, "Let's walk." She guided me to the center of the room and instructed me to take a slow lap, focusing on sensation rather than appearance. Each step felt oddly grounding. The shift of fabric, the soft sway of the scarf, the almost imperceptible weight of the earrings. It was as if the layers of careful refinement were teaching me to inhabit myself differently, more openly, more authentically. As I walked, Miranda observed, her expression thoughtful. "Do you feel the difference?" she asked when I returned to the mirror. "Yes," I said softly. "It feels like alignment, like I'm standing closer to myself." "That," she said with quiet conviction, "is the goal." Then something happened that surprised me even more than the earrings. She reached out and gently took my hands in hers. Not romantically. Not with any impropriety. But with a grounded, human connection, one person steadying another. "You are doing beautifully," she said. "And you are very brave." Her hands were warm, firm, reassuring. The moment lasted only a breath, but it ignited a warmth in me that spread through my chest, loosening something that had been clenched for years. We released hands almost immediately, both of us instinctively aware of boundaries, but nothing about the connection felt inappropriate. It felt necessary. Like witnessing someone step out of a shadow you've watched them stand in for far too long. As she turned back to her desk, she cleared her throat lightly. "Next session," she said, "we'll work on expression. How you present yourself not just in movement, but in communication. Voice, tone, confidence." I felt myself flush. "Do you think I'm ready for that?" "I know you are," she said. Her certainty settled in me like a seed, ready to grow.
And as I left the room that morning, the earring still lightly pinching my ears, I realized I had begun to look forward to these sessions not because I wanted escape, but because for the first time in my life, I felt like I was stepping into myself. I didn't sleep much that night, though I suppose at my age that isn't unusual. Still, it wasn't the kind of sleeplessness born from worry the way it used to be, those nights when I'd stare at the ceiling, turning over all the ways I'd embarrassed myself at the office or failed to live up to some unseen standard. No, tonight was different. It felt as if something inside me had shifted, a long-stuck door finally easing open after years of rust. And though I didn't know what waited on the other side, I sensed it wasn't danger but possibility. Morning arrived gently. I made tea the old-fashioned way, a habit I'd never shaken, and as the steam curled around my face I caught my reflection in the microwave door, softened somehow, though my features were the same as ever. Perhaps it was only the knowledge that someone had looked into me the day before and seen more than I dared see myself. When I arrived at the office, something strange happened. People noticed me. Not in the grand, move-a-moment way, no gasps or stares, but small acknowledgments, a smile from Anita in accounting, a nod from the usually stone-faced courier, even a soft morning from the intern who rarely looked up from his phone. Maybe it was the blouse I wore, yes, a blouse, borrowed from the small stash Marla kept in her desk for photo shoots, but I think it was more than that. Something about the way I carried myself. Something steadier. Marla waved me into her office almost the moment I set foot on the floor, like she'd been waiting by the door. She studied me with that same mixture of curiosity and encouragement from the day before, the way an art teacher might look at a half-finished painting. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. "Better than okay, actually." "Good," she said, her shoulders relaxing. "Because today I need your help with something unusual. A trial run, if you're up for it." I felt the flicker of nerves. Old habits die hard, but I also felt a new steadiness underneath them. "What kind of trial?" She reached into a garment bag hanging from her cabinet. "We have a visiting board member today, and the regular executive assistant called in sick. The schedule is tight, the impressions matter, and, if you're willing, I'd like you to step in." I blinked. "Me?" "As, in the assistant role." "Exactly," she said. "You did beautifully yesterday. You carried yourself with grace even when you were unsure. And besides," she hesitated, as though weighing her words, "you seemed happier in that space. Freer." There it was again. That gentle truth that others could see before I let myself see it. "I can try," I said. "Not try," she corrected softly. "Do." She unzipped the garment bag. Inside was an outfit so crisp and elegant it made my breath catch. A soft cream blouse, a tailored skirt that looked forgiving but polished, and a simple necklace that seemed to glow with quiet confidence. Nothing extravagant, nothing theatrical, just right. Right in a way that made me want to sit straighter, breathe deeper, step into a version of myself I'd never believed I was allowed to be. "I picked these because they match the energy you had yesterday," she said. "Professional. Warm. Capable. The kind of presence that steadies a room." My voice felt small. "You think I can do this?" "I think you already did," she replied. "Yesterday was just the rehearsal." Changing in the small conference room was oddly ceremonial. Not dramatic. Not flamboyant. Just careful. Intentional. Every piece went on with a quiet finality, like each button and clasp marked a step deeper into myself. When I emerged and returned to Marla's office, her smile told me everything I needed. This wasn't a costume. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't even an experiment anymore. "You look like you," she said simply. And for the first time, I believed her. The rest of the morning passed in a swirl of introductions, scheduling adjustments, coffee orders, and calm but firm redirections of a dozen tiny crises, none of which felt beyond me. In fact, each challenge seemed to draw something out of me I'd forgotten I had. Composure. Care. Authority rooted in empathy rather than force. The board member didn't question me once. If anything, she relied on me more as the morning went on. At one point, while walking her to the elevator, she said, "You run this office with a gentleness I wish more executives had." She had no idea how deeply that simple word, gentleness, would land. When the final meeting ended and the office exhaled its collective afternoon sigh, Marla found me again. This time not with instructions but with something almost like pride. "You handled all of that beautifully," she said. "I surprised myself," I admitted. "No," she smiled. "You revealed yourself."
There was a pause then, soft, unhurried, before she added, "And I think we're only just beginning to see who that is." Something in my chest tightened with emotion, a fullness both terrifying and astonishing. I felt it building, not like a storm but like sunrise.
"I don't know where this is going," I whispered. "You don't have to," she said.
"You just have to keep stepping forward." And as the day wound down, as I returned to my desk in the fading afternoon light, I realized I was no longer afraid of what I might become. For the first time in decades, I felt ready for the next step, whatever it might look like, whoever it might make me.
Outside, the sky was turning a gentle ember.
Inside, I felt something similar waking.
Warm. Steady. I wasn't an intern anymore.
And maybe, just maybe,
I wasn't who I always thought I had to be either. Not anymore. The next morning began with a calm I didn't quite expect.
Not excitement, not fear, something in between, a gentle hum beneath my ribs like the feeling just before a long-awaited conversation. I had laid out the cream blouse and skirt on a chair the night before, not out of obligation but instinct. They didn't feel like borrowed clothes anymore. They felt like tools, like instruments that helped me play a part of myself I'd silenced for too long. As I dressed, I noticed the smallest shifts, the way my posture adjusted, the way my movements softened without losing purpose, the way my breath steadied once everything was in place. It wasn't a performance.
It was alignment.
And at my age, after so many decades of pushing myself into shapes that didn't quite fit, that alignment felt almost miraculous. When I walked into the office, there was a brief moment where time seemed to pause. Not because anyone gasped or whispered, nothing so dramatic.
It was subtler than that. People recognized me.
Not the intern.
Not the clumsy assistant in training.
They greeted me as someone who belonged, someone who had stepped into a role with quiet confidence.
"Morning," said Anita warmly.
"You're glowing today." The courier gave me a small salute, playful but respectful. Even the intern, always distracted, always half-absorbed in his own world, looked up and said, "Oh hey, you're running the floor today, right?" As if it were the most obvious fact in the world. Marla emerged from her office just long enough to catch my eye and nod. Approval. Encouragement. Maybe even something like partnership, though I didn't dare admit how much that thought steadied me. It wasn't long before the morning's challenges rolled in, delayed reports, rescheduled calls, a client arriving 15 minutes early and then complaining about the coffee temperature. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, I found myself gliding through each task with a calmness I didn't recognize. There was power in the gentleness Marla had named. It wasn't softness as weakness, it was softness as intention. And every time I leaned into it, the office seemed to breathe easier. Around midday, as I was preparing the conference room for a meeting, Marla slipped in beside me. She carried a small box, not wrapped, not ornate, just simple and understated. "I've been thinking about yesterday," she said. "And about today. And about where you go from here."
My pulse ticked up.
Did I do something wrong?
Her laugh was quiet but warm.
"If you had, I wouldn't be giving you this."
She set the box on the table between us.
"Open it." My fingers felt clumsy for a moment, old nervous habits resurfacing, but the lid lifted easily.
Inside was a nameplate.
A modest one, metal with a brushed finish.
Elegant without being flashy. It read, "Administrative Coordinator Evelyn." I stared at it.
Not because of the title, though that was more responsibility than anyone had ever trusted me with, but because of the name.
Evelyn.
A name I had once whispered to myself in passing moments of longing, a name that had felt like a daydream, a secret too fragile to ever speak aloud.
When I looked up, Marla's eyes were soft. "Only if you want it," she said gently.
"Only if it feels right." I didn't speak for a long moment.
How could I?
Decades of quiet yearning pressed against my throat. Years of pretending I was satisfied being the person the world saw. All the times I had tucked away my own truth because I thought I'd lost the right to discover it so late in life. "It feels," my voice cracked.
I started again.
"It feels like the person I've been trying to meet my whole life." Marla nodded once, respectfully, as if receiving something sacred. "We move at your pace," she said. "No pressure. No performance. Just you, exactly as you are." Her words wrapped around something tender inside me. Not a push. A permission. The rest of the day passed in a haze of quiet transformation. People saw the new nameplate and accepted it without question.
Some smiled. Some congratulated me. Some simply absorbed the change as if it had always been true.
And maybe, on some level, it had. Near closing time, as the office settled into its end-of-day stillness, I caught my reflection in the glass door of the supply cabinet. The same face.
The same features.
But lit from within by something new, something long dormant finally stirring awake.
I touched the nameplate gently. Evelyn. A name that felt like home.
And for the first time in my long and winding journey, I felt myself stepping into a future that wasn't shaped by fear or necessity, but by choice. My choice. The days that followed were a quiet revelation. Office routines, once dull and repetitive, now carried a rhythm that felt both familiar and newly alive. Each morning, as I stepped into the space and adjusted my scarf, smoothed my blouse, or tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear, I felt the subtle weight of identity settling into place. Evelyn wasn't a mask. She was the part of me that had been waiting decades for permission to breathe. Marla continued to guide me, though her lessons became less about posture and powder and more about presence. How to carry a tray of documents with confidence. How to answer a phone with warmth that inspired trust. How to navigate a hallway crowded with colleagues without shrinking. Every motion, every glance, every small choice of how to occupy space was training, and every time, I discovered something new about myself.
It wasn't always easy.
Some mornings I would catch a glimpse of my reflection and hesitate. The face in the mirror was older than the interns around me, softer in some ways, yet capable of elegance in ways I had never imagined. There were moments of doubt. What would colleagues think? What would clients notice? What if I had simply overstepped? But Marla had taught me one thing above all else: the difference between fear and intuition. When I felt tense, it was fear. When I felt open and steady, it was truth. And gradually, truth began to outweigh fear. One afternoon, the office was unusually quiet. I was arranging paperwork on a side table when Marla appeared with a small stack of invitations. "The company holiday gala," she explained, "is in 2 weeks. They want someone to represent the executive support team. Would you like to attend?" I froze. Not out of fear, but because the thought of attending a formal event, as Evelyn felt, enormous. Public. Exposed. The same trembling excitement I had felt with the first scarf returned, magnified. "Me?" I asked, my voice small. "Absolutely you," she said. "You've grown so much in these past weeks. People notice. They respect the way you carry yourself. And I think it's time to let the world see what I've been privileged to witness." I blinked, unsure if I could fully articulate the mixture of pride, terror, and gratitude that swelled inside me. I don't know if I'm ready for that level of attention." She smiled, and it was a smile full of the quiet authority that had drawn me to her guidance from the very first day. "You don't have to feel ready. You only have to show up. The rest will take care of itself." That night, I went home and looked at the invitation, the words printed in elegant script, and realized that Evelyn wasn't just a name anymore. She was an identity I could step into, carefully and deliberately. A persona that carried with it decades of experience, wisdom, and the quiet grace that comes with age. I began preparing in earnest. Not just the clothing and the scarf and the earrings, but the mindset, the posture, the calm steadiness that Marla had taught me. Every evening, I practiced walking through my apartment as though it were the conference hall. I studied my reflection in different lights. I experimented with soft smiles, subtle gestures, and steady, intentional movement. By the night of the gala, I was nervous, of course, but not afraid. As I arrived, dressed in a muted but elegant ensemble that mirrored the confidence I had slowly cultivated, I noticed people noticing me. Colleagues I had known for years paused mid-conversation. Clients offered warm nods. The receptionist gave a small, impressed whistle. And though no one approached me to comment on my transformation directly, I could feel it, a quiet acknowledgement that something had shifted. Marla appeared beside me, her presence calm and grounding. "You're ready," she said simply. "I hope so," I whispered. "You are," she replied. Throughout the evening, I moved with careful attention. Each step, each greeting, each introduction carried the weight of deliberate presence rather than nervous hesitation. And with every smile returned, every conversation navigated smoothly, I felt more firmly rooted in Evelyn, the version of myself that had waited decades for permission to flourish. By the time the gala drew to a close, I realized something extraordinary. I hadn't just survived the attention, I had embraced it. I hadn't just walked through a room, I had inhabited it.
And as I stepped outside into the cool night air, a gentle breeze on my cheeks, I understood finally what Marla had been teaching me all along. Transformation is not about becoming someone else. It's about uncovering who you truly are, piece by piece, with courage, patience, and care. And in that quiet moment, under the streetlights, I smiled to myself. Evelyn wasn't just a name. She was a life. A life I could finally, fully live. The days after the gala were quiet, yet filled with a new energy I hadn't anticipated. The office felt different, not because anything had changed structurally, but because I had. Evelyn moved among my colleagues with the same ease I had once only dreamed of, carrying a calm authority that didn't demand attention but naturally inspired it. Every glance, every step, every interaction was guided not by performance, but by the authenticity I had slowly learned to embrace. Marla watched it all with a faint, knowing smile. She no longer needed to give instructions on posture, voice, or presence. She simply observed, her quiet approval more empowering than any critique. And I realized, in a humbling way, that she had given me far more than guidance. She had given me the courage to recognize myself, to inhabit my own body, my own name, my own space in the world without apology or hesitation. One morning, weeks after the gala, I arrived early, as was now my habit. I paused in the stillness of the office before anyone else had come in and caught my reflection in the glass of the reception desk. Evelyn's eyes met mine, calm, steady, and vibrant. She smiled at me in a way I had never seen myself smile, not at anyone, not at the world, but at me. At me. And then, in the quiet, she whispered my truth back to me. You are enough. You are seen. You are real. That day, Marla found me arranging files on my desk. Evelyn, she said softly, there's someone I'd like you to meet, our new junior intern. I think it's time you passed on what you've learned. I looked up, startled. Me? Teach? Yes, she said, her voice steady. You've grown, and now you can guide someone else. You'll be patient, perceptive, and above all, compassionate. You know what it feels like to be unsure, to be discovering yourself. That empathy is invaluable. I nodded, heart swelling. Evelyn had emerged fully now, not as a disguise or a fantasy, but as the truest version of myself, confident, gentle, capable, and completely alive. The years of hesitation, doubt, and hidden longing felt less like regrets and more like the prelude to something enduring. I spent the afternoon with the new intern, guiding them through routines, showing them subtle ways to navigate office life, and sharing the small lessons about posture, presence, and grace that Marla had taught me. With each smile I returned, each word of encouragement I offered, I felt a quiet pride that had nothing to do with achievement and everything to do with authenticity. Later, as the office emptied and the evening light filtered softly through the blinds, Marla approached me again. She placed her hand lightly on my shoulder, an acknowledgement, a shared triumph. Look at you, she said, almost in wonder. From clumsy intern to office queen. I laughed softly, the sound full of relief and joy. I never thought I'd hear that said, or even imagine it. You earned it, she replied. Not because of talent alone, but because you were brave enough to step into yourself. For a moment, we stood together in the quiet of the office, and I realized something profound. This transformation wasn't about youth, novelty, or spectacle. It was about decades of experience, self-reflection, and finally allowing myself to honor the person I had always been underneath the routine, the fear, and the doubt. I looked around the office, at the polished floors, the stacks of papers, the hum of machines preparing for the next day, and for the first time, it felt fully mine. Not in ownership of property or position, but in the ownership of self. Every step I had taken, every small adjustment in scarf, blouse, or posture, every quiet act of patience and attention, had led me here. And in that moment, I understood. The journey of transformation doesn't end when the outfit fits, or the title is earned, or the room recognizes you. It ends only when you finally recognize yourself, and you allow the world to see you, not the version that shrinks or hides, but the version that stands quietly, confidently, beautifully. I straightened my shoulders, adjusted the scarf, smoothed the blouse, and smiled at my reflection in the glass once more. Evelyn. That name, that presence, that self, it was mine, fully and completely. And for the first time in decades, I felt entirely at home in my own skin. As the evening settled, Marla gave me a small nod, almost a benediction,
And I knew that though guidance and lessons would continue, the most important transformation had already happened. I had become Evelyn, and Evelyn was free. Free to move.
Free to breathe. Free to live.
And in that freedom, I discovered a joy I had never thought possible at my age, a joy that carried softly but powerfully through every step I would take from that day forward.